Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to speak with you today. My name is Jessica Temple. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. So I don't have any conflicts, and as far as disclosures, I run a non-monetized blog and podcast for individuals with chronic illness called the Spoonie Struggle. Today I'm going to discuss self-advocacy, including family and friends, work, self, and community, as well as advocacy for others, such as speaking up and sharing resources. So with family and friends, when you're newly diagnosed or if you don't feel like you have a strong social support network, this is really the first place to start. So this should be a pretty varied network as much as you're able to create that. So it should include family members and friends to start with. So friends meaning individuals that you've known for a long time or new folks, Spoonies and non-Spoonies. It's great if you can include folks who have Ehlers-Danlos as well, but it's not a requirement. Facebook can be really helpful because there are lots of great groups for Ehlers-Danlos and for other types of conditions. But with Facebook, take things with a grain of salt. They're not all created equally. Inspire's also really good because it's anonymous and you can still get your needs met, much like Facebook, with a different platform. Conferences I found to be incredibly helpful, even if they're online, because I've met so many different people from conferences that I still keep in touch with, that I learn from. They tend to be all across the world, and it's just so helpful to include conferences in that building of the social support network. Support groups are also really great. So we're kind of in that phase with coronavirus where some things are opening up, but not everything's open yet. And that actually works really well for support groups because some of them are in person, but some of them are still online. So you can access whatever you feel most comfortable with, whatever physically you're able to do. And so you can meet people in person, and they should have support groups in most states and in a lot of counties as well. So you can meet people that are local, but you can also do online support groups so you can meet people across the country and around the world as well. So you have people in all different time zones that are really good supporters for you. The last one I feel really strongly about is psychotherapy. So psychotherapists are really helpful with dealing with chronic pain, grief, adjustment to an illness, anxiety, depression, PTSD, really anything a person might be experiencing, and they can give you the strategies that you need as well as the support. So I really think it's important, especially if you feel that you need it, to have a psychotherapist in that social support network. Now, much like you might have done when you first got the diagnosis, with educating yourself, it's important to educate them on Ehlers-Danlos and any associated condition as well. When I say associated condition, I mean things like GI issues, MCAS, POTS. It's just kind of a catch-all term. So you can let them know what it is. A lot of people may Google Ehlers-Danlos and say, okay, it's a connective tissue disorder, so you've got pain. Well, we know that there's a lot more that goes into it. So we can really let them know as much as we feel comfortable with about the intricacies of, well, why does this affect us so much? Why is it more than just pain? So we can let them know what the symptoms are, what we're going through, and what the symptoms could be for Ehlers-Danlos. It's helpful to let them know how it affects you. So are you doing things differently on a daily basis? Are there things that you used to be able to do, but that you can't do anymore? Has it limited your mobility? Has it limited your ability to work or to go places that you enjoy? Things like that. I really think it's important to let them know about treatments. So what you've tried, what's worked for you, what is generally recommended for the condition or for Ehlers-Danlos. And this is because a lot of people are well-meaning and they want to give you recommendations and advice and things like that, but sometimes they can be a little bit misplaced. So they may recommend things like hot yoga or certain diets that may not be very helpful for you. It could be, but it may not be. And so rather than get in that dynamic of them giving you unwanted advice, one of the ways you can start to combat that is to let them know what's helped. You can also discuss with them different areas of challenge. So like I mentioned before, a person may or may not be able to work. They may be able to work, but it may be a lot more challenging. They may have more difficulty with mobility or varying mobility. So for me, I alternate between being able to walk versus needing a cane versus needing a rollator. So letting them know that every day can be a little bit different that way. Sometimes we can go the places we want. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can do the things that we want, and sometimes it causes flares. I also find it really helpful to have handouts for them, like a 1 or 2 pager that can explain the condition, what it is, and any questions they may have. And to also offer websites. So you can offer things like the Ehlers-Danlos Society or YouTube videos or other types of Spoonie websites that have helpful information, just so if they want more information, they can take it upon themselves to look that up, or they can ask you as well. It's helpful to let them know what to say and what not to say. So some things that you could let them know to say are, can I pick up groceries for you? Or can I pick up your prescription? You're amazing. Go relax. I'll take care of it. That sounds so hard. Some things you might not want them to say are, have you tried? Or I know just what you mean. I have back pain too. If you just fixed your mindset, but you don't look sick. And when it comes to this, be firm and assertive. So obviously not rude, but let them know that these things, there's certain things that are really helpful for them to say and things that feel a little bit more harmful and can really upset a person. So this will go to something I will mention a little bit later of, you'll let them know when you want advice. So not necessarily to give unsolicited advice. Also let them know what to do and what not to do. So one thing that I've noticed when it comes to chronic illness is that other people are well-meaning and they do want to help, but that tends to take away a person's independence and autonomy. And again, it's well-meaning, but still, we want to do as much as we're able to do and as much as we feel safe doing in a given day. And it can be confusing to others because that looks different every single day. But we still really do want to maintain as much independence as we can and do as much as we can. So I'll go into this a little bit more later, but again, we will ask for what we need to, and they shouldn't just jump into offering that help if we didn't ask. Let them know that it's helpful to avoid showing pity or being patronizing, not to talk louder, and to respect your personal space. So let's say you're home not feeling great one day. You can let them know if you want them to come over or not. Sometimes they might want to come over because they want to help, but if you don't feel well or you're not up for company, it's really kind of an invasion of your space. They don't necessarily want to pry into your personal life or into your medical life unless you've let them know that it's okay, because there are boundaries that are really important. Let them know to focus on you, not your disability, but that it is okay to talk about the disability and Ehlers-Danlos. But when they're doing that, to talk to you rather than your caregiver. It's important to dispel myths and misconceptions that might come up, such as, if we look good, then we feel good. Well, that's not necessarily true. We are allowed to take pride in our appearance. Sometimes it helps us to feel a little bit better or to feel a little bit more human or less disabled. And we also want to fit in. Other people are allowed to look good. So just because we're sick, we shouldn't be allowed to? That doesn't make sense. We are allowed to look good and take some energy and some spoons to do that. Everyone with EDS has the same symptoms. Well, it's a syndrome, and everyone has different symptoms and different severities, and it changes, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a monthly basis. So it looks different for everyone. We're either fine or we're sick. Well, again, with EDS, it's kind of a gray area. There are times when we're fine, and of course times where we're sick, but there could be times when we're just kind of okay, or, maybe that knee is having trouble in this shoulder, but the rest of the time, or the rest of us are fine. But the rest of our body's fine. It really varies. If Ehlers-Danlos was really a physical disease, it wouldn't affect your mental health. Well, we all know that's very untrue, and the research has many times over proven that. So Ehlers-Danlos is painful. There's a lot that goes into it, and it takes a lot out of us, which can affect our mental health. And we also know that when our mental health is not great, that it causes a lot of pain, Ehlers-Danlos or not. They're really hand in hand, and they run on similar systems as well. Lastly, if we're smiling, then we feel good. Well, we're allowed to laugh. We're allowed to have good moments, even if we're in an 8 out of 10 pain, even if we still have a dislocated knee. We're still allowed to smile. So it's important to dispel some of these myths and misconceptions. In addition, it's important to explain what life is like for you. So again, every day could be different. Every moment can be different. Things vary with Ehlers-Danlos. Things are unpredictable. So some people, their symptoms of one of the conditions goes away, but they might get a new one. So things really look different. I've had periods of time where I've had no GI issues whatsoever, and then it comes back full-fledged, and there was nothing I could point to. I've had MCAS come on out of nowhere with no triggers that I could see. And I've had a lot of subluxations without any predictability. So life is different, and you can't always predict things. So that means when you get together, when you're supposed to get together, things may look different. You may have to use a mobility aid, which you didn't have to use an hour ago. Or you may have to go home and reschedule that appointment or that time together because you just don't feel well anymore. And they might not understand at first. So it's important to explain what your time together might be like, and that you may not be able to follow through on every commitment. And that it's not necessarily that you don't want to spend time with them. It's not that you're antisocial. It's that you're not feeling well and you've used up all your spoons for the day. I think it's also helpful to discuss your adjustment to having Ehlers-Danlos, and that things have changed. You've had to adapt to chronic pain, to your body not necessarily listening to the things that you've been telling it to do. You've had to have changes potentially to relationships and work and life, and it takes a lot of time to go to therapies and treatments and just to get the diagnosis. So for me, it took decades to get the diagnosis. So I've had to go through periods of adjustment throughout my life. It wasn't just a one and done. So to let them know kind of what these experiences have been like for you. As I mentioned earlier, it can be really important to set boundaries of, when they come into your life, when you want them to do certain things, what they can talk about, what they can't talk about, what your boundaries are, what your limitations are, and that you're not going to push yourself further than you feel comfortable because you're trying to take care of yourself. Additionally, it's helpful to ask for help when you need it. So let them know that you will ask for their help. It's great for them to offer as well, but you'll ask, and especially for advice, rather than them offering advice freely, that when you want their advice, you will ask. And when it comes to asking for help, I really recommend asking for specifics. So, I need you to pick up the groceries. Can you please put the laundry away or put the laundry in the dryer? Can you drop off this prescription? Can you do this or that? So let them know what you actually need so they know how they can be helpful, but to mix it up. So don't always ask mom to do the laundry or Aunt Sarah to pick up the groceries. So give each person different things, and some things that are harder and more time intensive and more physically intensive, and some things that are quicker and easier. That way they'll be around more often and be more willing to offer help. Work is a really important place to advocate for yourself. So going into work, just know your rights as an employee, what the employer can do and what they can't do. The ADA has a great website that outlines a lot of these things and outlines your rights and what you need to know. So the first thing to think about after that is disclosure. You do not have to disclose anything you don't want to. You can disclose just your diagnosis. You can disclose how it affects you. You can disclose when you're going to the doctor, but you don't have to. So think about that. And also ask for what you need. So if you need accommodations, like I recently needed one of those ergonomic keyboards and the mouse because my wrists were starting to sublux terribly and I was having trouble with typing. So I spoke up for what I needed. That doesn't mean I had to tell my boss about my condition. I did tell some to HR, but they do not disclose to your direct boss unless you're in a very, very, very small company, which again, it's important to know your rights through the ADA website. So speak up for what you need, but know that you don't need to disclose. And think about reasonable accommodations. So again, you can find information about the reasonable accommodations, but in general, these are things that aren't really cost intensive for the job and don't really put too much of a burden on the job. So if they fall within what is considered reasonable accommodations, they should be able to offer that to you. Either way, put everything in writing. Put what you're asking for and put what they gave to you and save any communications. Heaven forbid you should need that in the future. Use the chain of command with these things. So don't necessarily go to the CEO when you're asking for something. Ask either your direct supervisor or HR. So kind of know the rules and the culture within your company. And when you get those accommodations, make sure to thank your employers for their support so that they know that you're appreciating what they did for you. It's also helpful to find a support person at work. So when you're there, much like having just a regular support person in your life that you can disclose things to, find somebody who you feel is a really safe person that you can trust not to disclose without your permission, who you think might understand. Again, you can think about the level of disclosure you want to offer. It doesn't have to be every single detail. It can just be, I'm in pain. I have a chronic pain condition, or I have Ehlers-Danlos. But it's helpful to have that person. So if you're having a really hard day, if you're feeling sick, if something's going on, you have that network to go to within your position that doesn't necessarily affect your employment. The next thing is a disability lawyer. So hopefully no one will ever need this, but they are there if there has been discrimination or if the employer is not offering reasonable accommodations, or not necessarily offering, but allowing for reasonable accommodations. A lot of them work on a contingency, meaning that they don't get paid unless you get paid. So just know that, because for some of us, we've had to spend a lot of money on medical treatment and we don't have a lot left over for getting other needs met. Work-life balance is really, really important. We live in a culture where we're expected to just work, and go. And when it comes to Ehlers-Danlos, that doesn't really work for us anymore. So we need to prioritize ourselves, our family, children if we have them. We need to prioritize our health. So are we getting to the doctor as often as we need to? Are we getting to the doctor when we're having an emergency or an issue? Are we able to do our therapies, our treatments at home, our home exercises? And also, are we just generally taking care of ourselves, taking some downtime? So that's important to make sure that you have that balance between those things. And most importantly, think about your needs. So throughout the course of your career, if you're able to still work, things may change for you. So if the job is starting to get really hard, really stressful, or really taking a toll on your body, you might need to consider, is it better for me in this moment to stay versus leave? Do I need to change the position that I'm in within the company or the type of job that I have? Or if I still want to stay with the company and do that job, will they offer flex time, or can I do telework? Because those may be options that can allow you to much better take care of your health while also still working. It's really important, obviously, to take care of yourself. So if you're newly diagnosed, if you're going through a bad flare, if you just got a new aspect or diagnosis related to Ehlers-Danlos, give yourself time to grieve. Allow yourself to feel however you feel and to be kind to yourself about it. Acknowledge and respect your limits. So with Ehlers-Danlos, there are things that we can still do and things that we may not be able to do. I used to go for runs, which I cannot do anymore because of my subluxations in my knees and my ankles. Also, with taking breaks, I used to be able to just work myself to the bone and go, go, go. And I can't anymore. I can't just kind of spend my weekend jam-packed full of things. I have to find a thing or two and then take the rest of the weekend for downtime and doing some more low-key laid-back things. So over time, I've learned my limits and I've acknowledged that, okay, I need to really follow what my body is telling me. Take breaks when you can, especially if you're at work, and activity pacing. So this goes kind of hand in hand with what we were talking about. I like to talk about something called the Goldilocks principle, which means you don't want to do too much or too little activity. You want to do what's just right. And that just right might look different for you every day or every type of activity or every month, and that's okay. Everyone's different, and you need to find what that just right is for you. But it's really important for our bodies to not do too little or to be too bedbound if you can avoid it, and not to do too much. If we do too much, we end up in bed and then we start that cycle again. We want to be careful to avoid deconditioning by doing that activity pacing of just right. And again, always follow what your doctor has recommended. I'm not trying to give medical advice, but listen to your body. This next one I found to be really important, and that's make modifications to activities. So I historically have loved going to amusement parks, and when I was younger, I could go all the time, no problem. And I went last weekend and I found that it was a lot harder than I'd remembered even from a few years ago. So what I did to be able to still go and enjoy things as best I could is I took a rollator. Even though I physically could walk, I've been having a lot of subluxations, so it helped me for mobility, but it also helped me to sit down so I wouldn't get too sick with my POTS, and I wouldn't have to carry things and just kind of pull my shoulders out, so I was able to hang everything on the rollator. And also, I have young kids, so I was able to push them in the rollator while I was holding on, so I didn't have to carry 40 or 50 pounds that I really can't and shouldn't be doing. So I was able to still do all the things that I wanted to do with those modifications, and that's been really, really helpful. I also recommend prioritizing yourself. So that can be saying no when other people are asking you to do something or putting extra things on your plate that you just don't have spoons for that day. Delegate. So if there are things that you are okay with other people doing, even if it's not perfect, delegate, let them know, I need you to do this. I could really appreciate you doing this. So you can focus on what you really need to do and taking care of yourself. And make sure you're setting realistic goals within the bounds of what you were able to do in that day or that week. And realistic goals, again, like activity pacing, may change over time, and that's okay. This is when it's important to really know our limits and to know ourselves. We have to be kind to ourselves and engage in self-care, ideally every day. This can be, in the form of a shower or a bath, or drinking a cup of tea, taking rest breaks when we need it, reading a book, watching playing a game on our phone, spending time with a friend is different for every person, but whatever feels good to you. Listen to your body, and if it's telling you to stop, stop. Again, use aids if needed. So I kind of alternate between just using braces versus using a cane versus using a rollator. Depending on what I need, I have it there. This next one was really helpful for me. I was diagnosed formally with Ehlers-Danlos about 7 months ago, although it had been suspected for a while. And it was hard for me to finally get that diagnosis. But what I ended up doing was getting excited and finding my purpose. And for me, I felt like that purpose was sharing my story, sharing with other people, and advocating for other people. And it's been really, I'm kind of getting chills as I talk about it. It's been invigorating and exciting for me. And I've also learned so much about myself so that I am not stuck in the grief that I would otherwise be. So find a purpose, whatever that may be. In the community, it's important to decide whether or not to disclose. So much like I talked about with work, this can be with other friends, it can be with distant family members, it could be with complete strangers. But things to think about include, do you trust them? Are they safe and supportive? How might they react? Will you be safe? And what is your reason for disclosing? Just because they ask doesn't mean that you have to disclose, but you can if you choose to. So I actually have created for myself a Spoonie card that's similar to the one that the Ehlers-Danlos Society has. And I carry this with me in the back of my phone. And what that does is on one side, it shows kind of what Ehlers-Danlos is. And at the bottom, I put, please be patient with me, please be kind. And on the back, I've put what the different treatments are for Ehlers-Danlos, what the different comorbidities are, and what the symptoms tend to be. So if I get questions and I am not in the space to answer it, or if I feel caught off guard, I just hand them a Spoonie card. And that's something that you can download online from different places, or you can make your own online. It's really easy. And that way you just don't have to deal with the hassle if you're not in the space to do so. It's also helpful to think of ahead of time responses for those mobility questions of, why are you using your grandmother's wheelchair? Or who did you steal that handicap tag from, when people just don't understand? Or but you're too young to be in pain or to have these problems. It's misguided, they don't understand, and you can decide how you want to respond to that and when you want to respond to that. I personally don't like to respond to that, which is why I always have something to give to them. And educate them as needed. So you can choose to educate them on Ehlers-Danlos, or you don't have to. You can give them a website or a resource. You can go into as much detail as you want, and it's really up to you. As far as advocating for others, I see this as incredibly important. So the first thing is to share your story. So there are lots of different opportunities, whether you're sharing with a family member or a friend, sharing with another Spoonie or someone else who has specifically Ehlers-Danlos. You can go to conferences and share your story. You can share on podcasts. You can share on Facebook pages, not pages, but Facebook groups. But get your story out there because it will help others to identify and to find their purpose as well. It's important to use social media wisely, so speak up when needed, but make sure that you're doing it appropriately. So speak up about maltreatment, what worked, what didn't work, what was harmful, and what you do next time. So we're not trying to bash people who have provided the maltreatment, but instead we're informing other people of what has been helpful, what hasn't been, and maybe where to steer clear, so they don't have to go through the same things that we might have had to go through. And be a good role model. I've given a lot of recommendations today, and I'm doing as I say. It's important to not just give lip service, but to do as you say. And lastly, but not least, share resources. So if you know of people who are newly diagnosed or who are really struggling, you can act as a mentor or a coach. You can kind of take them under your wing and educate them as you learned throughout the way and tell them what's worked for you. You can even, as lower down, practice or role play with them. So you can practice dealing with the mobility questions. You can practice answering, but you're too young. You can practice talking with doctors about conditions or asking for and being assertive with what you need from them as far as treatment or testing or answers, which can be really helpful because when you're going to the doctor, it's a really anxiety-provoking situation. It's quick, and we often have brain fog. And also there's that power differential. So it can be helpful to role play what we want to say ahead of time. We can speak on podcasts or at conferences, which is really helpful. We can participate in research studies. Goodness knows there's so much more research that needs to be done with Ehlers-Danlos to get us where we need to be, and to participate when able is fantastic. And lastly, to share links and products. So this can just be with friends or with other Spoonies, can even be on things like Facebook or Inspire. So what has helped you? What has worked? Where have you gotten some really great information? Or have you read a really great research article that just answered all of your questions? I know I've done that with the Ehlers-Danlos Society before, and many, many times with the 2017 criteria. I've found a lot of family members and friends who we suspect have Ehlers-Danlos, so I've shared those links and they've been really helpful. So if you have resources or know of resources, it can be helpful to share with others so they can move through the process even more quickly than you have. Well, thank you so much for letting me speak today. It's been a pleasure.